Hi, welcome back to my garden tour part 2. It's now the middle of August here in Ontario. We're having a bit of a heat wave. It is glorious and tropical out, and my garden is thriving. So I thought that I would do a bit of a show off. I always find this time in the season is about when things start to get a little bit out of hand, a little bit out of control. So my strategy is to balance embracing the chaos with trying to temper it where I can. Right here, I'm standing in the middle. I've got most things in full display and a couple of things that are coming. One that I'm excited about is my watermelon. So I want to show you that. And this is what I mean. So these little tiny dill plants that have been growing up, and I love them, are now these giant plants. But I want to save some seeds, so I'm letting them go, and I just sort of push them aside as I come. Okay, over here, I have some potatoes that are dying back, and I've been harvesting them for quite some time now, and some of my watermelon. Right here you can see I've got a 1 and a 2 for some nice big ones. And every couple of days I come out and I check if they're ready to harvest. Watermelon will not ripen off the vine, so I do not want to harvest them too soon. So how I check is, you can see all along the vine, there are these little tendrils, these little curly things that are going to try and grab onto things. So you look for the one that's closest to your watermelon where it's attached, and it will turn brown. So at the beginning, it's starting to turn brown just a little bit, but I want this whole thing to be brown. That and the bottom, I want to be a nice bright yellow. Okay, so I've got the bottom. The bottom's a nice bright yellow, but both things are important. And ideally, it's not resting on wet things, so I'm going to try and prop it up in some drier mulch here. And that tendril. Both things haven't happened. Don't harvest it yet. And my photographer husband just noticed that I have a couple potatoes that are peeking out. So I've already grabbed one. I'm going to grab this one too. Any others? Trouble with potatoes when they come to the surface is they can turn green in the sunlight, and then they're no good to eat. But, oh, a little bit. I can cut that off. Yeah, good. Dinner. Okay, over here are some of my loofah babies, and they are doing great. I'm so excited. All I've done is really water them and, you know, sing them songs, that sort of thing, to try and get them to go, but they are doing great on this trellis. I have another one that's going up over my trellis at the beginning of the garden as well. I'm now at the stage where I have to do the heartbreaking task of, see these little babies here? This poor little innocent baby wannabe loofah. I have to kill it. Ugh. I suppose I don't really have to kill it, but the reason to do that is I want the plant to put its energy into growing the smaller loofahs that are already formed, like this one right here. I want there to be enough time for this to turn into a nice, great big brown loofah so that I can make sponges. And if it's setting the little fruit, I might get some fruit that I could eat, but apparently loofahs don't taste very good. Another one. So I'm going for the sponges. Over here, so my poor zucchini. This is only one of my zucchini plants, thankfully. So yesterday I started to notice that the newer leaves were getting really wilty, but the older leaves were still pretty crisp. And then I found a little telltale bore hole, and sure enough, I had a squash vine borer. In fact, I had 5. So last night I was out here with a flashlight. I was doing surgery. I wasn't able to take any pictures because my hands were occupied with the scalpel, the flashlight, and my gloves so I could squish them. Actually, I fed one to my chickens. Whichever chicken ate it is my favorite. So I did my little surgery. I cut out the squash vine borer, and then you can see on the zucchini vine, I piled up soil and mulch. What I'm hoping is going to happen is that I'll start some new roots from the vine that will help this plant to recover. And I'm sure you'll agree, a lot of these leaves look really sad this morning, but believe it or not, I do think they're a little bit better. And ones like this are making me feel kind of happy. Sure, it's wilty, but it's still got a little spring in its step. So, fingers crossed, my plant is going to recover. If not, I do have two others, so all right. Ooh, let's look at my nasturtiums. So these nasturtiums I think are so pretty. They've been spilling out over my bed here, and they're getting on the edge of being a bit spent, which is fine. And now I can harvest the seeds, which I've started to do. So the seeds like this, when they're big and green and firm, but they haven't turned brown and seed-like yet, you can pick them off and come off pretty easily, just like that, and then you can pickle them. So that's what I've done. Apparently they're going to taste like capers. I hope that that's true. I'm gonna have them with smoked salmon in the winter. And over here, next to my daughter's poppies that are going to seed, I have some peas that are going to seed. They produced lovely for me. We got lots and lots of bowls of peas with our supper, but now they're dying back as peas do, and I would like to get rid of these. So the way that I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to describe it because I don't think there's much magic to showing you, is I'm going to cut them off at the bottom, but not pull out the roots. So the roots of peas are going to put nitrogen back in the soil, which is very useful if, let's say, I want a climbing plant here that's going to be a flower or a grapevine or something like that. A little bit of extra nitrogen would be great. So leaving the roots in the soil, but otherwise just cut them off and untangle it. A reason to leave them to this stage or beyond is people want to save the peas for planting, and that is something that I'm thinking about. You might see that this doesn't look like a brown, dried out pea pod. It's still pretty springy, it's pretty wet if I were to open it, not ready to be planted to the ground. And in fact, let's open it up and have a look. So yeah, it's pretty juicy still. It's got one, maybe two peas that would probably dry up and be pretty good for planting. And I can do that. Even though I just took it off the vine like this, they don't actually need to dry out on the vine. They do need to dry out before you plant them, or otherwise you're gonna risk them just rotting in the soil. But I can put these in a dark area on my counter and just let them do their thing, dry out, then store them in a cool, dark place. Probably my cold storage room is a good place to put them until next year, and I can put them in the ground. They don't need to go in the freezer either. They'll be fine if they're just at room temperature until then. Better than opening the pod, because when I open it, you know, I kind of risked putting my nail into the pea pod as well, is I can just take the whole pod off. So like this one. So this will dry out as well with the peas inside it. So I can put this on a dark area of my counter, and then when it's ready, just open it up. Let's see, there might be one or two that actually have dried out because I've let this go for a while. So this one here, now if oh, it's still a little springy. Well, not quite, okay. Well, you'll have to trust me on it that when it's dry, it's much easier to just pull it apart and then use the peas inside. And I'll grab this one too. I don't really need peas to plant for next year, but why not have them? More peas is a good thing. And in fact, I do actually have some new little pea plants that I've started. They're right behind my poor sad little zucchini. And the last thing that I want to show you on this garden tour is my tomato trellising. So I've got, it depends on how you want to define it, 3 or 4 different ways that I've tried trellising indeterminate, not potatoes, tomatoes this year. So this is my Florida weave. So for a Florida weave, you take 2 big stakes, and as they grow up, you weave back and forth string in between to keep them upright. It's not my favorite, partly because my stakes are not quite tall enough for some of my plants, but mainly because this is keeping them from going in 2 directions. So it's keeping them in one plane, but in the one plane, I'm having a lot of trouble with keeping good air circulation and preventing them from flopping over. So yes, this is my theoretically single stem pruned determinate tomato patch with the Florida weave. So I just talked a lot about indeterminate tomatoes. I'm assuming that you are familiar with the difference between indeterminate and determinate, but not everybody is, and certainly I wasn't a very short time ago. So determinate tomatoes will grow to a determined height, and you want to be careful with how you prune them. You don't want to prune too much, just for air circulation and disease really, because you're going to prune away the tomatoes. But indeterminate tomatoes, like these, will theoretically keep going up and up and up and up and up. So you do want to do more pruning because the main 1 or 2 stems are going to be much better at giving fruit than the what we call suckers along the side. So indeterminate tomatoes are much better for training to have a single main stem and still having a good harvest. So all along here, I have some string trellised tomatoes. I'm going to show you these ones because I have one variety right next to the next. This is a nice, beautiful yellow tomato, and you can see it's coming in. That's going to be a beautiful orange and be very sweet. And as it's been growing, there's a string attached to the top here that I've been winding around this main stem, and I break off the suckers as it goes. So it grows a little bit taller, I twist the string around. That's this one, and then this one right here is I think it's a plum tomato. It's called Chocolate Sprinkles, and it makes these lovely dark red with kind of stripes and sprinkles. So this kind of trellising I have really enjoyed. The one thing that I might do differently, because I keep having to adjust how much string I have. And you can see up here, I've got some funny ways of wrapping it around to make it be the right length. What I would do differently, you can get these little clips, and in fact I have them, where instead of wrapping the string around the single stem, you attach it to the stem. You put a little clip that will hold the string, and then it's a little circle that holds the stem without choking it. So I think I'm going to try that next year. Back over here is kind of my last type, but I have it done 2 different ways. So this is, again, single stem for an indeterminate tomato. So I got these very sturdy triangular cages. So as it goes up, I should see, and I believe I do, the single stem coming up. Here you can see a sucker that I broke off. And then the only things coming off of my single stem should be my sun leaves at 90-degree angles. Oh, here's a sucker. Let's get this. And my flowers, which will turn into tomatoes. So this is working really well. And one thing that I like about it is these are stackable. I have 2 stacked, one on top of the other. If my plant got really crazy, I could add a 3rd. That's one of my problems with staking tomato plants. They tend to outgrow the stake. I can't even find it. In here, oh, look at this. Here's where I put all those pea vines that I cut back before I went away camping. Well, that's interesting. Back here is my tomato plant that I'm attaching to this lovely A-frame just on the side as it goes up. And it's also going very well. Actually, I need to bring it over just to bring it to this frame here. It's starting to grow that way. But the same thing, if it started to get too tall, I could actually train it to go over and down the other side or over that way, and I still have lots of sturdy trellis to attach it to. You know, other than my trellis is filled with my loofah. But like I said, such happens in August in the garden. Things get a little bit crazy. So in short, the string trellising is probably my favorite, but this good, sturdy, with a plan of what's going to happen when it reaches the top, if it reaches the top, stake trellising, or A-frame as this one is also going very well for me. And now let me show you my Determinate tomatoes, which are not going, I mean, they're fine, but their trellising is a little sorry. So over here, I have a Determinate plant that definitely got away from me, and I don't think I expected the fruit to be this big. I thought that this was going to be a rather short plant. So I don't know if you can even see it. It helps that it's red. I have another of those triangle trellises right in the middle that was standing up and supporting everything, and then the plant decided to take over and pull it off to the side. And then this one over here, you can see the same thing has happened. And it also doesn't help that I've got this giant marigold that's stuck in the middle as well. Very much a chaos garden. But you know what? It's giving me tomatoes, and I think I've learned for next year that my strategy of, oh, I'll prune it when it needs it, turns into I don't prune it, and then I get this. So I either need to pick smaller Determinate varieties or perhaps stick to Indeterminate for a year. Well, I was a little long-winded there. Thank you for sticking with me. If you did, I love being out in my garden. I hope you enjoy being out in yours. Thanks for sticking around, and if you're interested, check back later for some more videos. Hi, welcome back for my garden tour part 2. Nope.
That's the best one.